I am, thanks. I am enormously excited to introduce Reverend Miriam Spies. It's a great privilege and delight. I first met Reverend Spies, who I knew as Miriam then, at Five Oaks Family Camp. We were trying to do the math and we're struggling, but Miriam, Reverend Spies, was about 8 years old. Back then, she was a bit of a card shark, and she beat all of us at card games. And if memory serves, it was Uno that she was particularly good at, but I'm not entirely sure. I'll defer to you, Miriam. Reverend Spies initially studied journalism, but returned to school to study theology later and was ordained as a United Church minister in 2015. Both as a student and as a minister, Reverend Spies has participated in all manner of United Church of Canada leadership activities and has been a delegate at the World Council of Churches. She's currently a PhD candidate at Emmanuel College at the University of Toronto, and she teaches in the field of disability and theology here at Martin Luther University College, specifically in our continuing ed program. Reverend Spies is the co-founder and co-editor of the Canadian Journal of Theology, Mental Health, and Disability. She is the co-founder and the co-host of the Mad and Crip Theology podcast series. And she is also the co-founder of a collective called the Mad, Crip, and Care Collective that is looking at or committed to bridging academic environments with faith communities, church leadership, and people with lived experience in the areas of mental distress, disability, and caregiving. She is a popular and frequent preacher and speaker, and I feel immensely privileged and blessed to be able to sit and listen to her speak today. I know that I'm speaking on behalf of everyone here to extend a warm welcome to Reverend Spies, and I'm really excited about hearing her talk today. Thank you, Reverend Spies.
You are far too kind, and folks can call me Miriam. So it is an honor and a delight to be in conversation with you today. My cerebral body impacts my speech, so I believe Jackson or Andreas is dropping a Google Doc into the chat for you to follow along as needed. As Nora mentioned, I am a PhD candidate in the midst of writing my thesis, and so this presentation touches on some thoughts I'm working with. It is a work not yet complete, and so I offer it to you, a church, a community not yet fully actualized by this spirit, as Dietrich Bonhoeffer would say. Is there a Google Doc in the chat?
Not yet, Jackson. Do you have the Google Doc link to put up?
Yep, I'm just pulling it up right now. Just
Okay,
give me one
thanks.
second.
Thank you. Wanna make sure people have it. So in our time together, I will give you a brief glimpse into my current work, which is around retrieving and clipping an incarnational model of ministry to shift perceptions of and orientations toward ministry so that people with disabilities might serve in leadership with congregations. That is far too much to cover today, but we'll begin dreaming about it together. If you came here hoping for 10 things churches should practice to offer inclusion, a word I hate, by the way, or how we might interpret healing narrative, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. This is, I believe, the work of the whole Christ community. So while I do have things to say, and what preacher doesn't, I'm interested in dreaming and imagining together. First, I will talk about what it means to quit and why I identify as being quit. Next, I will explore Bonhoeffer's contributions of Christ for me and Christ in and as community through the lens of disability and queer theologians. We'll explore some questions for reflection together, ending with any particular questions you might have for me. I hope that sounds okay for everyone. My current work draws on personal experiences that are scattered throughout to spark a theological imagination. So I want to begin by sharing a story with you. When I was 10, my father was called to serve a new congregation. It was a larger urban church which was inaccessible for people with walkers or wheelchairs. The community also seemed inaccessible. I remember sitting at coffee hour in a corner where I was put with older people who couldn't hear me. Adults stood around with their coffee and chatted to one another. Other children ran around playing tag. My father was occupied with pastoral conversations, so I was often alone, surrounded by people, yet physically placed like the elders on the margins of the community. I expressed my unhappiness to my mother, who suggested I write a letter to the pastoral care committee. And so, with all the boldness of a 10-year-old, I did. Things did not magically change, but there was new awareness. People started making more of an effort. Tables and chairs became the norm, so there was no longer a margin in the room. gradually developed funds among the adults at coffee hours. By the age of 16, when I felt isolated at high school, without friends I felt able to invite to a birthday party, I told my parents and I actually felt closer to the adults at church, one of whom shared the same birthday. That year, and for several years to come, I celebrated my birthday with friends ranging in the age from 50 to 90. Many years later, I continue to mark birthdays with that particular birthday party. Here is one photo from a celebration from about a decade or more ago. We will return to that story later. Though I was born Mississippi, it has taken a long time to accept that I am a person with a disability. And it took even longer to identify with the language of being queer. In fact, I came out as queer or lesbian much before claiming queer. For some, claiming queer will never be a part of their story, as that word carries with it so much harmful baggage. A shortened version of the derogatory term cripple. And I want to be very clear, that is okay. For others, identifying as queer and or queer is the recognition of those words, finding power in and community through those terms. Now, they don't describe all of who I am, but they help me understand myself and my experience in the church and the world. Queer also act as a verb, as in to queer blank. In my work, I might attend to queer functions of ministry, word sacraments, and pastoral care. Though I imagine there are endless possibilities of queering. To put it fairly simply, queering imagines ways queer bodies and minds might transform the space or time or reality. The term functions to reverse, displace, and replace ableist framings. The term also parallels queering, used by queer theorists to imagine how queer bodies impact the environment. Here's the example offered by Alison caper. Rather than bend disabled bodies and minds to meet the clock, Crip Time bends the clock to meet disabled bodies and minds. Crip Time disrupts Western normative time. In a little while, we'll explore this, what cripping might mean for our ecclesiology and our incarnational theology. For now, I invite you to notice how your body feels when you hear, see, or use that word crip. You can share in the chat if you would like, and perhaps Alan or Laura could read out the responses.
I can read out things in the chat box if you'd like.
Thank you.
How does your body feel when you hear, see, or use the word crip? To repeat the question. Discomfort. Proud. I find that word difficult as I associate it with a negative term. Curious. It's comfortable for me to hear and I feel relaxed, but I imagine using it for myself, my body gets a bit tight and uncomfortable. I know I feel some sense of relief actually with the idea of crip time.
Thank you for sharing.
Oh, sorry, a few more coming in now. It's a new word for me, curious and pleased to consider it. If I use it publicly, I will need to be prepared for a reaction. Liberating.
Thank you, friends.
Oh, sorry, and last one. Honestly, it depends on where or when or with whom. Hopeful.
Yeah.
Expansion of perspective. People are still talking, Miriam, which is great. Expansion of perspective and curiosity about looking at the world through another lens with a sense of justice in it.
Thank you, everyone. Those are great responses. And we can chat more about that later on. So for our purposes today, I want to explore Christ for me and Christ in and as community together. First, Christ for me. The Christ existing for me is the Christ that is present for me. Christ is not himself in isolation, within relationships, Bonhoeffer insists. This is good news indeed for all of creation, but it is significant to retrieve and contextualize the implications of this necessity of relationship for disability theologies. Christ invites us into relationship by taking on our flesh and dwelling among us. I want to briefly engage Christ for me through the work of Nancy Iceland, Thomas Reynolds, and Deborah Freeman. Christ is for me because Christ experiences and is in solidarity with each person, and this includes being in solidarity with our body. Iceland echoes Bonhoeffer's contribution when she describes her surprising revelation of God, not as mighty or omnipotent, nor suffering or pitiable, but God in a set-up wheelchair. Quote, I recognize the incarnate Christ in the image of those judged not feasible, unemployable, with questionable quality of life. Here was God for me. For Iceland, the incarnate God reflected living with a disability, someone whom the world considers to be among the last and the least. A God in Christ for me incorporates all of humanity, assuring that we reflect the Imago Dei. There is in this the radical mutuality of relationship, a vulnerability to become involved, taking the risk of being interdependent with sometimes frail human beings, which is an emphasis in the theology of another disability theologian, Reynolds. Through the incarnation, Reynolds believes Jesus transforms what it means to be human, reversing conditional standards of human worth. The integrity of the human is neither a function of a change value and productive ability, nor is patronized body, but rather is based on God's unconditional regard. Christ for me, in a similar vein to Iceland, need not match human economic standards. Rather, by embracing vulnerability, Christ displays honor toward those marginalized by society. Christ for me assures us that God is in solidarity with the fullness of humanity. with all our vulnerable self. Finally, Creamer developed a limit model for a different way of reflecting both on God and humanity. By asserting that the limits are an unsurprising part of being human, Creamer proposes on limits are understood by and reflected in God, resonating with her Holy quest. A God quest with limits for me includes the experience of disability and embodies the characteristic of perseverance, strength, and creativity that she posits are possible because of the reality of meeting limits. It might be argued, though, that this does not critique the structures in both church and society that are pervasive with ableism, relegating many people with disabilities to life in poverty, where they or we are given the opportunity to be creative, persevering, and so on. However, these attributes of creativity, perseverance, and strength do honor the resourcefulness of people with disabilities and teach us about the fullness of humanity experienced by Christ for me. To imagine God as having limits then opens new possibilities for humans co-creating with God as partners in caring for the world, as well as putting those with disabilities on a just equal footing with able-bodied people, because in reflecting the divinity and humanity of Christ, all of us have limits. As Sam Reynolds and Creamer all contribute to how we, especially queer people, encounter Christ for me. A Christ who not only understands, but who shares in our embodied experiences of disability, vulnerability, and limits. Christ for me sits beside those on the edges of coffee hour, countering isolation with relationship, and being present and dwelling amongst those pushed out of the way. We are not alone. We are constantly being called and ushered into relationship with him. Because for me, imagine honors the ways in which our equipped bodies move and spasm, our lips speak with stutters and accents, and our minds engage and reflect in a variety of ways. imagining Jesus Christ, the God human, as homie widens the community to draw on CRIP ministry. And so I believe Christ homie invites all of our bodies and minds to shape the Christ community. Let's take a few minutes in breakout rooms to chat with each other. Here are a few questions we might engage with. And Laura, could you read these questions out?
I certainly can. I've also just dropped them into the chat box for people. So the questions that Miriam is asking us to consider are, how does Christ pro me in solidarity with your particular body sit with you? How does a CRIP, disabled, limited Christ challenge or resonate with your image of Christ? And how might these images impact your relationship with Christ and others?
Back to a talking head for a few minutes. So we experience Christ homie as we encounter Christ in community. Bonhoeffer presents Christ both in and as community. As Jesus homie requires relationship with him. Christ in and as community requires relationship with others. Kenyan philosopher John Mbidi articulates, I am because we are. And since we are, therefore I am. Just as Christ's form in relation to me, we are formed in relation to the Christ community. Disability theologians have continued to call the church to account for not living fully as the Christ community, offering ways to incarnate Christ through community more justly and completely. Eastland referred to the church as being like a city on a hill, physically inaccessible and socially inhospitable. Christ's body, she asserts, is exceptional in its exclusivity, pointing to how church churches keep people with disabilities out, and church officials affirm our spiritual callings. With ours, there is no place for all bodies to minister. Incarnating the disabled God look like loving what is carnal, our own existing bodies in the church that is both already and not yet. Echoing the primacy of relationship insisted upon by Bonhoeffer, Islam calls the church to be a community of faith and witness a coalition of struggle and justice, and a fellowship of hope. Bearing witness to that Christ in and as community for his land, take seriously the realities of our equipped bodies and embodies justice. For Reynolds, in the face of vulnerability, the cult of normalcy looms large in Christian communities. When we feel differences, namely in this instance, people with disabilities, the code of normalcy swings into full operation, assimilating nodes, including the change or anomalous, that which is deficient in value because it does not fit into the ordered scheme of things. Communities which look who is worthy of relationship, and the cult of normalcy pressures our own bodies into conforming. The church, as only ever a prefiguring of the kingdom, upholds the cult of normalcy, as we heard reflected clearly in Laura and Alan's research last month. Drawing on Bonhoeffer's being free for the other, Reynolds calls us back to regard ourselves and others as created in the image of God, and as created for relationship. Freedom for being the Christ community means freedom from alienating and dehumanizing powers that debilitated by excluding persons, asserting that without this, the church cannot be the church. In anticipating God's kingdom, Reynolds suggests the church can prophetically offer justice and equality for people with disabilities. Significantly, Reynolds words by empowering people with disabilities to find a place within the church, to creatively contribute to the life of the community. The church becomes itself, that is a place of redemption for all. In becoming Christ in and as community, the church affirms vulnerability, extends hospitality, and is continually transformed by God through the Spirit. Creamer's discussion on limits proved worthwhile, as it makes similar moves to Reynolds' work on vulnerability, trusting that limits are both unsurprising and natural, both on an individual and communal basis. Creamer follows Sally McPake's assessment. The denial or rejection of limits eventually leads to the perpetration of injustices that cause harm to self and other beings and that impact the health and even survival of the body of God. Denying or depreciating limits individually and our community is antithetical to living through and in Jesus Christ. This might come in the form of conducting illusory categories of we versus they, or contributing to emotional or physical self-harm, Creamer contends. She briefly engages how people with disabilities or other discouraged from or denied entrance into ordained ministry or ordered ministry. Although Creamer doesn't make the point to exclude someone from ministry because of our limits, the church may be insisting upon illusory self-image or of perfection, or colluding with the cult of normalcy. When we believe ourselves or the Christ community to be limitless, we are usurping God's coming action. Christ's community is both the now and the not yet promise of God. Living in that anticipation and continuing with Creamer's position that strength, perseverance, and creativity arise from our embodied limits. There's characteristic also arise in the incarnate Christ community. Christ in and as community embodies and in being there for one another, perseverance in pursuing God's mission on earth, and creativity in the multiple ways we live out our ministry together. And so in retrieving and contextualizing Bonhoeffer's Christ as and in community, perceptions of and orientations toward ecclesiology, including expressions of ministry, shifts. Once again, these disability theologians have made particular contributions in witnessing to Christ as community, especially as it relates to being and becoming a place of vulnerability and hospitality, as well as being attentive to our equipped bodies and limits. When experiences in society are marked by loneliness and exclusion, the Christ community brings multiple generations together to celebrate a teenager's birthday, visibly being there for the other. Through embodying Christ, the church can equip its model of ministry and creatively and intentionally broaden who serves and how one serves. So now it's time for another brief small group conversation, and Laura will read out the questions and put them in the chat.
Thank you so much, Miriam. As I was saying in our break room, I've heard you speak many times, and I always find your talking very thought-provoking. So the questions that Miriam is encouraging us to consider again in breakout rooms. So I'll also look to Jackson to work his magic again. Check in with your body. What sensations did you feel when you heard the story of the coffee hour and the birthday party? How about when you consider a Christ in and as community? Christ in and as community takes God's spirit, time, and our relationships and actions to glimpse. What are you doing or being, or might you offer to do or be in your church to embody the Christ community?